And this webinar is our first one, basically giving a quarterly update on new releases in Xero, as well as some tips and tricks. So my name is Ryan Piercy. I'm a director in our business advisory as well as our software or systems advisory department. And I'm joined by my colleague Nick, who will be kind of running you through some of the tips and tricks of how to get the most out of Xero later on. He also works in the business advisory department and assists me in our systems advisory solution as well. And he's an assistant accounts executive, so you'll be hearing from him a bit later. So what we're looking to cover today. So we'll first start with the new releases, and some of these are quite large, some of these are smaller, but I'll run through all of them. The one I'm going to be focusing on with a bit more information this time is Pay with Transferwise. That will feature quite heavily early on, but I'll also run through some of the smaller ones that you might not have noticed. And then later I'll hand over to Nick. We'll cover the tips and tricks of Xero, but also pick up on Receipt Bank, because I know it's a program a lot of you may be using as well. So the main releases in this quarter have been, as I said, Pay with Transferwise, some alternative payment options that are available through Xero. I'm going to run through them just as a comparison to Pay with Transferwise. I'll be jumping onto some of the new reporting tools that have or are being released by Xero. Some of you may have seen these already because they're releasing them in stages to all their client base. So some of you may have access, some of you may not, but the aim is they'll all be available to everyone within the next month. There's been a few tweaks to invoicing. Hopefully some of you are using the new invoicing system, but I'll run through that if you've not seen it before. And there's been a few changes to the mobile apps. So if you're using those on either iOS or Android, I'll run through some of the changes on what you can do now via the different apps. Brilliant. Okay, so let's jump into the first topic, which is Pay with Transferwise. So what is Pay with Transferwise? So for quite a while, Xero have been hoping to bring out a system that allows you to pay directly from within Xero using their API to connect into other systems. Pay with Transferwise is their first iteration of this release. And what this does first, how it's been released first, is to enable you to pay supplier payments, so bill payments. It doesn't allow you to pay your payroll, purely UK or pound sterling bills that sit in your awaiting payment section in Xero. And I'll run through how that process works. They've selected Transferwise as the tool to do this, and that's really because Transferwise has a brilliant API. It's a very secure system. It sits underneath a lot of other architecture. So Xero have picked this tool as their first release phase for a bill payment solution to prove the concept. My expectation is then other systems such as the more digital banks, such as Tide, Revolut, Starling, will probably follow in a second wave and then go on to the larger banks such as HSBC, Barclays, etc. Some of the banks probably will never have this integrated feature because they just do not have the architecture in the background. These are likely to be ones such as Lloyds and Handelsbanken, which have always struggled to connect in with the likes of Xero and QuickBooks. The packages for Pay with Transferwise start at £3 per month, and that is 10 transactions, and they increase steadily upwards. They're not a pay per transaction, although if you exceed the number of transactions, there is a pay per transaction, but I'll come on to more specific pricing. The reason they've done this is to try and make it simpler. I'm not sure if they've succeeded. I guess I'll leave that up to your judgment, but I'll run through the packages later on. And at present, there's no approval system built into Xero. There is a way you can build approval into that, and I'll run through that a bit later. But if you need to segregate who is making the payments, i.e. who's setting them up, and who is actually initiating, so if you've already got an approval system in your bank, this is something you want to look at if you want to trial Pay with Transferwise. Okay, so some of you may have already seen this feature. Awaiting payments. This message has been popping up. The first bit So point 1 relates to the new payments system. So if you try and pay bills in Xero, you go through to a new page. They've basically redesigned the architecture in the background to make it a bit more simple and also to enable them to work with this payment solution. And the second option is to be able to sign up with Pay with Transferwise to enable that final payment. So you can still use Xero to create your payment schedule and export that and import it into your bank. But the Pay with Transferwise feature allows you to just push a button and that pushes your payment schedule automatically into Transferwise, and allowing you to basically do a single click transfer from your current bank into Transferwise to enable that to be processed. So in essence, what does it do? So it allows you to pay multiple bills with one single bank transfer. So instead of you having to create every single line within your bank, or download and export, fiddle with that to make it compliant with your bank and upload that, you can push a single button and that pushes your payment run across into Transferwise. You set up a transfer with a reference number and the correct amount across the Transferwise, and then everything happens automatically regarding paying your suppliers. I'll run you through the process of exactly how this works, but that's in essence how Pay with Transferwise should speed up the payment process from within Xero. As soon as Transferwise receives the funds, assuming that the fund is exactly the amount that was on the bill payment, it will automatically schedule the payments across to your suppliers pretty much instantly. It has two references that you need, the exact figure and the payment reference that it gives you. And if it doesn't receive that amount will not transfer across, and you'll receive an error back notifying you that something has gone wrong from Transferwise. So how does this work? So basically you will jump into your Xero account and go to the business section and bills, and you'll go to the awaiting payment tab. And as you would normally be doing, on the left hand side you tick the bills that you want to be paying. So you tick those and then select the Make Payment button, which is just above where you'd be selecting those bills. Hopefully most of you have done this already. If not, then that's where you go. Once you click that, and once you've selected your invoices you want to pay and you click that Make Payment button, you'll go through to this new screen. So previously you would have seen a completely different screen, and they've revamped this and made it hopefully a bit more simple. And at the top they've added this Pay Bills with Transferwise option. If you want to explore this and subscribe, click Learn More, and it will take you through a process of setting up a Transferwise account. When you do that, you run through basically some authorization process that connects your new Transferwise account to Xero, and what data will be shared between the two. Basically, it's pushing across information on the contact, the invoicing question, and the bank account details that are stored in that contact to enable Transferwise to pay it. This is all done via a secure API. So as soon as you've made that connection, you've authorized it, everything is done in a secure encrypted manner between the two systems. But once you've set that up, you'll still come and then you'll enable make a payment. You'll still come through to this page, and you'll select the bank account to make the payment from. Now, this isn't your Transferwise account. This is the account that you're going to be sending the money from. So your normal bank account, you're going to be sending the money from across to Transferwise to secure that payment to your suppliers. So if you've got a current account, you select your current account in that in this stage, which is this point. So hopefully you get your list of current accounts or reserve accounts. You select the one you're going to make the payment across to Transferwise on, and then it brings up this screen. In the payment method bit that I've highlighted in the circle, don't worry, that does not appear. You would select a drop-down method, which is Pay with Transferwise. Normally at this point you'd probably be creating a payment file for export, but once you've created your Transferwise account, and everything on the right hand side then disappears, and that's because the payment goes through as soon as you transfer that money across from your current account into your Transferwise account. At this stage you can edit any bank account details that you need to, as long as you've got the authorization to do that. You need that user account that allows you to do it, but generally it will pull that information across. I've used a demo account here, so I've got no bank account information stored against these suppliers. But as long as you have updated that in your contact information within Xero, that will pull across automatically. And this is basically then just a reviewing page. Now, what I should note at this point is that every single line on here counts as a transaction. So counts when we looked at pricing earlier and it said £3 per month for transaction, each one of these would count as a single transaction. So this would be 5 transactions, even though you're paying, in essence, in this line, Tesco twice. And so it's consolidating it. This still counts as 2 separate transactions. You need to be aware of that when you're working out your pricing plan. But really, this should be as simple as checking you've selected Pay with Transferwise, checking you've got the right bank account at the top left, and then your details here are correct, making a note of the total. Once you then select to pay, which admittedly isn't on this cutout, but is in the top right hand corner, it will go through to, it will go through to this screen. So this is basically connected to Transferwise at this point and created a reference code that you're going to have to input to make the transfer. So hopefully you can all see this, but you have a payment reference code starting B11, and it gives you the amount that you need to pay, as well as the sort code and the account number you need to transfer that money into. So this is the point where you would set up the payment transfer to go across into Transferwise. Once you've done that, i.e. basically you've pushed next, it takes you through to this summary of what you've set up, including the payment date that's gone across into Transferwise. Now, please note that the payment does not go across into to your suppliers until you do that transfer across into Transferwise. It will sit there waiting in Transferwise for your money to arrive. But at that point, you've pushed OK, you're happy with everything, and you go back into Xero automatically, and it notes that you have sent this amount across ready for payment. Now, from a pricing point of view, the key amount, the key number is the amount of transactions you're going to pay. I think most people will probably be way above the 10 payment transactions a month, and be somewhere either in the 40 or 100 or maybe even more than that, depending on how many invoices you're paying. So please note that obviously for the 100, you're paying basically 20p per transaction. Now, when I jump onto some of the other suppliers, you see this is quite comparable, actually slightly cheaper than some of the competitors in the marketplace, but it's possibly more than what you'd be paying for direct payments out of your bank. Now, Xero would love to offer this for free as part of the subscription, but there is a charge that comes across from Transferwise, and that's purely because they're doing a faster payment system. It goes across instantly to all of the suppliers, and therefore there is a charge associated. So really you need to weigh up, is the cost per transaction worth it for the amount of time I'm saving of pushing a couple of buttons? The next phase in development that Xero and Transferwise are working on is that connection between Transferwise and your bank account, so you won't need to do that transfer. As long as you've got the relevant authorization, when you connect into Transferwise, you'll then basically say put in your bank login details, and once you've done that, you can then authorize the payment directly. You won't need to jump into your bank to transfer money manually across to Transferwise to verify this payment to your suppliers. So at this stage, it's a bit of a hybrid. You still need to enable that payment across from your current bank account, but as development rolls out over the coming year, they expect to build those links in with the different bank accounts, and I think these will roll out slowly. They'll build one link in with one of the bank providers first, see how that works, and then the other ones will be able to connect in. So some other useful information is that you will need a UK bank account to be able to transfer money across to Transferwise. That is a requirement. As I said, a transaction is a single individual bill, not a collection of bills to a single supplier, and not a batch payment as such. It's every single individual bill. It only works with supplier bills, payroll, although they are aiming to roll that out in the future. And it also doesn't currently work with foreign currency bills, only work with pound sterling. Once again, this is something they're working on. Transferwise does work in foreign currency, so I think this is more the API connection for how long it takes for them to build that with the automatic conversion rates for foreign exchange. So there's a bit more complicated just with UK pound sterling supplier invoice payments. As I noted earlier, Transferwise payments are instant as soon as that money hits the account with the right total and the right reference number, but you have 10 days to transfer the funds from your current account across to Transferwise once you've pushed that payment run across Transferwise from Xero. Brilliant. Now, something I probably should have mentioned at the start is if you have any questions as you go along, please drop them into the chat and we'll deal with them at the end. Purely so I can run through this all. As I mentioned, there's some other alternative payment options that connect already in with Xero. These were actually in place before Transferwise was in place, and two of these are Xero and Credec. Xero is more for accountants, to be honest, and is slightly more expensive. It works multiple regimented authors. Like Transferwise, you need to transfer funds in. You have a separate Xero bank account until the money arrives in Xero. You cannot pay the suppliers. Unlike Transferwise, it does not. You cannot do that in arrears. The money has to be there already in advance for the payment to go out. But you can schedule payment runs. You can't do that in Transferwise. The scheduling basically works on when you're making the transfer across from your current account into Transferwise. So you can't say, I want to create this payment run, but have it for the next month because you've only got 10 days to make that transfer. Xero does allow this. So if you want to schedule something for a month in advance, you can create the batch payment run and put the date in and then make sure the funds are there and it will automatically go through in the future. Credec actually goes one step further than the Transferwise solution. It already syncs in with most UK banks. So you can create the payment file and push it across into Credec, and then it will take you through that authorization process to put in your bank details. And that can be done via the approver. So you can get someone creating it, scheduling it, pushing it into Credec, and then it will ping a message across to, I guess, the person that needs to approve the payment. They put in their details, it drags that money out of your bank account and pushes it across into the suppliers. It is slightly more expensive than Transferwise if you look at the costs, but that does depend on how many transactions you're doing. Because it's a flat £10 per month and 30p per transaction, there is a kind of balancing act on how many transactions you're going to be paying per month. It could be that Credec is cheaper than paid with Transferwise. Over time, I believe the integration between Xero and Transferwise will develop to a point that it exceeds what Credec does, but at the moment I actually think Credec's solution is a little bit more advanced. The only difference is because Xero and Transferwise are working together, if you're looking in the longer term, it's probably a better bet to work with that solution now. So that's kind of everything on the payment options I wanted to run through. So I'll now jump into some of the new reporting tools. So some of you may have noticed these are being released over the next few months. The first ones I'm going to touch on are a short-term cash flow report that's been brought into Xero. This only runs up to 30 days, so it is very short-term. They've also released a business snapshot looking at your liabilities, your assets, and some of, I guess, the more basic KPIs. Some other reports that have been released or changed recently is there is now a CIS audit report. So if you run CIS, you can see the breakdown per invoice that makes up your monthly return, which you couldn't see previously. And you may have noticed if you've been jumping into the reports recently, some of the more, I guess, regularly used ones, such as the profit and loss and balance sheet, the format has changed, and I'll jump onto those in a second. But I also want to run through the ability to customize some reporting. This is something that Xero released quite a while ago, but people aren't really aware of, and you can bespoke your reports quite heavily to how you want them to look, and it's worth doing that, spending a little bit of time playing with it. So I'll run through that in a second. So this is now where I need to just jump out into Xero. Let's see if this works. Brilliant. Just checking, can everyone now see Xero? I'm seeing some nodding, so that's good. That works seamlessly. Let's hope that I've not been timed out in Xero and that when I change things, I don't have to re-log in. So this is the short-term cash flow report. As you can see, it's noted as a pilot in the top. They're still working on it, but it should be released to most people, most users over the coming months. You find this, if you are looking for it, in the business tab at the top. So you'll see 2 new reports. They've not separated these into the reporting area in accounting because they're hoping to make this similar to the dashboard, i.e. an area you come into more frequently to manage how you your finances are running. Now, I've used demo data to demonstrate this, so this graph looks useless. Trust me, if you've got live data in here, you will see this going up and down based on when you expect to receive and pay money out. So if you've got your payment terms for your invoices and your bills, you will see your cash balance go up and down. Now, obviously, like I said, it's demo data. There's not much in here. So the simple thing is we've got a very large overdraft that by the end of the month gets slightly better. But the key thing and what they're working on is to give insights in what you can do. So to make this better, they say change your due dates to when you'd expect to make payments or when you expect to receive them. So if you've seen that in Xero before, that is in your invoices section. So let me just jump across into this. That's what I found out if it's logged me out or not. Oh no, okay. It's asking me to verify my account. So I'm going to struggle to do that on a demo. Always happens on a demo. All right. Well, hopefully that's something that Nick will be able to touch on later just to show you, or at least something response. Okay, so I talked about the CIS report. So obviously this is only going to be important for those that are running CIS, but if you have been and you've been doing this through Xero, you're probably aware of the CIS contractor report. So if I click into this, and hopefully it doesn't take ages to load. By the way, this is the report that you would use to make your submission across to HMRC directly from Xero for CIS. That ability has probably been in place in Xero for, I think, around 6 months, 3 to 6 months. They started charging for it, just the ability to send it across. You can still track your CIS, but they started charging for the ability to send it across from April. So just be aware of that. If you are or want to use that feature, there's a £5 per month charge for the ability to submit your CIS across to HMRC. But the new thing they've added is this CIS transactions function. So if you click into this, and there you go, you can run it for a period and it will show all your invoices by bill. So for example, if you've got lots of information on one single supplier invoice, you can group that so you can just see the total per invoice and it'll break it down for the different areas. This has only recently been released, so it was quite historically hard to tell what your monthly return was made up of per invoice. You'll be able to now see this from within your monthly report. So quickly touching on the revised profit and loss report, hopefully you would have seen this if you've been jumping into it. Just quickly touching on it. This is what the new report looks like. The layout slightly allows you to customize things and filter things a bit more quickly than you used to be able to. Function-wise, it looks very similar, but it works a lot more dynamically with the customized report, which I'll come on to when I can actually demonstrate something a bit later. For now, I'll jump back into the presentation. Brilliant. Okay. Other releases from Xero recently is invoicing, tweaks to the invoicing feature. Main release has been regarding credit limits. This has been something that users have been requesting for quite a while, and they've now brought this in. So you'll be able to see this in your contact screen, and you'll be able to add a credit limit amount. For the new invoicing feature, if you're using new invoicing over the old historic classic invoicing, you'll also get an alert if your invoice exceeds that credit limit. And something they're going to release over the coming month is the ability to prevent the sending of invoices for certain user roles if the credit limit has been exceeded. So you can manage your billing to your clients, your billing to your customers based on the credit limits you bring into the Xero contact screen. They've also added the ability to add the payment services. So adding the ability for your customers to pay directly or pay by direct debit straight from your invoice screen. And I'll just touch on those via some screenshots quickly. So this is an extract from the contact field. If you've ever gone into the contacts, you It's quite a way down. You have to scroll a bit down inside any contact, but basically if you went to contact section, pick the contact, push edit, this screen will appear and you simply go and type the credit limit in. Obviously, certain user roles have the ability to edit contacts, some don't. So if you want to manage that process with your staff, you just need to make sure the staff have the relevant roles that they can't edit the credit limits. And then once you are using the new invoicing function, as hopefully you would have seen this before, you select the customer, you type the it brings up an alert saying you've exceeded the credit. So for this customer, I'd set a credit limit of 5,000 and they had 679 or 1,000, sorry, 679 pounds that were still owed. I did a new invoice for 6,000 pounds and it's picked up that because of that, they're exceeding the credit limit by 1,679 pound. So in future, it will prevent you invoicing for an amount that exceeds this total if you want to turn that on. So jumping into the mobile apps, there's only been a few small tweaks really in this area recently. I think the biggest one is the ability to track mileage if you're using the Xero Expenses app. And by typing in the postcodes, i.e. the locations, it will map out via Google Maps, via an integration with Google Maps, what that distance is and automatically bring that into the expense claim. It's quite a handy tool for processing your expense claims. If you're not using expense claims and you have a lot of mileage, it's definitely something to look at. If you're not using another tool that does the same thing, you can, if you're using Receipt Bank, you can integrate Trip Catcher, which also tracks mileage, probably slightly more effectively than Xero Expenses does. But if you're not using Receipt Bank and you do a lot of mileage, I'd definitely look at the Xero Expenses feature. You also have the ability to, from within the app, both iOS and Android, attach files for the bank reconciliation. You can now create invoices. Sorry, I have a dog, if you just heard that. Create invoices with CIS deductions. This is something you couldn't do in the apps before. You had to go into the web browser to be able to create these. You can now do that directly from the apps. You can create non-reimbursable expenses directly from the expense claims. So this works very well for directors that have a card, the bank card. You can do that directly from within the expense feature. Select that you've paid it from the bank and it puts that straight against the bank reconciliation. You don't need to manually pay that through the bill function, which you would have had to have done historically and was a bit of an annoyance. And then coming soon, something that they've noted they're working on at present is the ability to invoice an accepted quote. So if you're using quotes, you're sending that across to your customers and those are being accepted, you'll be able to convert that into an invoice directly from the app in the near future. So jumping into the tips and tricks, I'll just run through what my colleague Nick is going to touch on, and then I'll hand over to Nick. And then hopefully after that, my internet will be working and we can jump back into the reporting side. So from Xero, we'll touch on the account watchlist. I'm not sure if this is something you use, but it's quite powerful. Definitely if you want to look at control accounts or a key expense that you need to monitor. So the account watchlist that sits in the dashboard is an area I'd definitely advise looking at. We touch on the find and recode and how that can save time in moving things about after you've posted them into Xero. Nick will go through his bank rules and how you can automate some of the bank reconciliation process. Using draft journals to roll those forward if it's something you've got on a recurring basis. Some Xero to Xero invoicing. So if you've got any customers that are on Xero, you can make a connection directly from your Xero to theirs. You create the invoice, it automatically appears directly in their Xero, so you don't need to send things via email. And you also touch a little bit on Xero Expenses and the labels. And after that, you'll jump onto Receipt Bank. For those that are using this, talk about auto publishing and how by using that and Recode in Receipt Bank, it really speeds things up from a purchase or expense processing perspective, and how that integrates with supplier rules, and how you can utilize the payment methods to speed up the bank reconciliation process as well. So I will hand over to Nick. He can share his screen if he's still there, that is.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So my name's Nick and I work closely with Ryan in our SAS team. Can everyone see my screen okay? Brilliant. I can see some thumbs up. Fantastic. Cool. So I'm just going to start with the short-term cash flow and how to add in some expected payments. So we got to this screen in the short-term cash flow. So if you scroll down to suggested actions, and then under the add dates section, you can go to add expected dates. So this will take us through to our invoices and into our invoices that are owed to us, so we're awaiting payments for. And just under this column here, we've got some little plus icons. So we can click in here and we can add in some expected dates of when we'll be receiving payments. So for City Limousines, I'm just going to add in 16th of June 2020. So that's when we're expecting them to pay us. You can also add in some notes if you are working with other people in the accounts team and you just want to make a note for them so they know that you've spoken to this client. Once you've clicked save, we can then go back into our short-term cash flow. And what that will do is that will just update invoices owed to you. So when we're expecting it in 2 weeks' time, and on the drop down, it just shows that invoice. It'll also show us within that month the invoices that we're expecting to be paid. So at the minute, it's just over £1,000. And then it'll also adjust this graph to show us what our projected cash flow is going to look like throughout the month. Cool. So the next item we're going to look at is the accounts watch list. So that's normally sitting at the of your dashboard. And at the minute, I've got 4 items that I'm going to keep a watch on, or keep an eye on. So normally these are sort of the main codes you'd use within your Xero. Maybe high-risk codes or important codes you want to watch. To be able to add codes to this watch list, you just go to Accounting and Chart of Accounts. And then you scroll down to the code you want to keep an eye on. So the one I think I want to keep an eye on is this motor vehicle expenses. And then by clicking on that, just at the bottom here, you've got to show on dashboard watch list. So just by ticking that box and clicking save, we go back to our dashboard. That will now appear within our accounts watch list. So it'll break it down. So you've got your year-to-date figure, and you've also will have the monthly amounts that have gone through that code. So the next thing we're going to look at is find and recode. So as Ryan was saying, find and recode is really useful for bulk recoding. So if you've realised that you've allocated some costs to the wrong account code, or that the cost you've allocated to that code actually have VAT on, whereas they've been coded with no VAT, we can come into here and recode all of the expenses at once. So to do that, we go into Find and Recode. And then we can filter out the transactions to just highlight the ones we actually do want to look at. So if we go, we'll look at the account code 463. Oh, sorry, no, we're going to look at general expenses. And we'll do a search, and that'll pull out all the transactions within that nominal code. So these 2 codes, 2 transactions here for PC Complete. I've realised that actually these relate to computer costs. So I can click the Recode button in the top left, and these are the options now that it will give me to be able to change. So I'm going to change these computer costs to IT software and consumables. And I've also realised, looking at the invoices, actually these are exempt expenses. So I can change the tax rate at the same time as well. So by clicking review, it's just confirming that we're happy to complete this recode. And then once we click confirm, that will now update those transactions, and they've now been recoded to the information we just put in. Cool. So the next thing we'll look at is bank rules. So to do that, we'll go onto our dashboard. We'll go into our items to reconcile. The best way to set up bank rules is to actually set them up directly onto the transaction that's been pulled through from the bank statement. And to do that, just on the left-hand side above the transaction, we have an options button and then an option to create the bank rule. So this will take us through to the creation screen here. So the first box at the top, this is what Xero is going to be looking for within the bank statement to try and reconcile that bank transaction to. So what I'd recommend doing on the first box is to change it to any text field. This means it will pick up items in payee, description, or reference, depending on how the bank pulls through into Xero. I'd also then change this equals just to contains. So it's trying to find anything that's within that transaction. So we're going to want to look for Central City Parking. We'll then set the contact name, Central City Parking, and box 4, this is what we'll be allocating that transaction to, so the code. So we're going to put that one to motor vehicle expenses. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the percentage here. So this is the amount we're going to want to allocate to that code. So at the minute, we want to allocate 100% of the value of the transaction to code 449. If we wanted to split it 50-50, for example, we could change this to 50%. And then we could also allocate some of the expenses maybe to, we'll just put to general for now. We could put the other 50% to there. So you can split across a number of codes using this. Once we save the rule, this should take us now back to our reconciliation screen. And we scroll to the bottom, this code is now ready to reconcile. So clicking OK, we've now done the reconciliation. And this will also work for all future items that relate to Central City Parking. So again, we've got one here we can click OK on. We've got one here. If you decided you didn't want to apply the rule to this transaction, so maybe it was 100% of the parking needs to go to motor expenses, you can click Don't Apply a Rule. You can also edit the rule before reconciling, so it updates all future items. And there was also on there the option to edit the transaction before reconciling. So if it's just for this specific item or this specific transaction, we can go to View Details and we can edit the item. So if we wanted to allocate £7 to motor expenses and £5 to general expenses this time, we can do that, saving transaction and then pressing OK. Cool. So the next thing we'll look at is draft journals. So to get to the draft journals, just go to Accounting and Manual Journals, which is down the bottom. So from here, what we can do is we can raise new journals without having to post them to our accounts. So we can save them as a draft. So maybe the managing director could come in and have a look before posting. Or if you have some junior members in the team, they could come in and post all the journals, save them as draft, and you could come in and approve them, post them to your accounts once ready. So to do that, we just click on New Journal. The narration is just what we're going to want to be able to pick up and understand what the journal's for. So I'm going to call this accruals. So this description will automatically pick up what our narration is. You can change it. So we'll call this telephone. We'll choose our telephone code. Let's say we haven't had our bill for April yet, so we've cost us £20. We'll put the remaining amount into accruals so that can be cleared off next month. So once all the details are in, you can save it as a draft. So this won't actually post to your accounts yet. You'll have all your draft journals in here, and then once you're happy, you can come in, click the ones you want, and click post. And now they'll be updated in your accounts. There is a report under accounting reports where you can see all the journals that have been posted. So it's just under accounting here, journal report. Just change the date range. And what we'll do is we'll just show posted manual journals and update. And then these are all the journals that we've posted manually through our manual journals section. Cool. So now we're going to look at Xero to Xero. So Xero to Xero is really good for automating the process of sending potentially sales invoices or receiving supplier invoices directly into your Xero account. So it works by a Xero network key. So each Xero account has its own Xero network key, which can be found under settings, and on the right hand side, Xero to Xero. So this is the code that's specific to this account. So if we have a customer who also uses Xero, we could click here to send our Xero network key to them. So by popping in their email address here, we can send this over to them. What they do is that they then add this to the contacts within their Xero account. So by going into contacts, all contacts, Bayside Club we'll look at. So it would just be in the edit option on the right hand side. And then scrolling down the bottom, they can enter that Xero network key here. And likewise, if you ever receive a Xero network key from a supplier, you can enter it into their supplier details here and click in save. And what this will allow us to do is it allows us to send an invoice directly to their Xero account. So it will go into draft on either side. So it will allow you to code it using the normal codes from your chart of accounts. And also it will allow you to, if you needed to question any of the costs on there, you can question it with the supplier as well. So to send that to customers, you just go into the invoice, into invoice options at the top, and to send via Xero network. This will then generate an email that's sent through Xero, and just by clicking send, that will go through to them. Brilliant. So the last thing we're going to look at in Xero is expenses and labelling. So expenses can be found under business and expense claims. Now, so with expense claims, if you're an advisor user, you'd be able to see all these tabs at the top. So you'd be able to raise expense claims for yourself, you'd be able to review them, and also then mark them as paid. We've also got all of the options in here. So if I was going to submit an expense claim as a staff member, I'd go to new expenses and we'll click on expense claim. So we'd first of all, we could upload an image of our expense here. So it could be a receipt, a fuel receipt, maybe a coffee receipt or a meetings receipt. We could then enter the information, so what the amount was, description, so we could put meeting, spent at Costa, the date it was spent, and the nominal code that relates to. So we'll put that under entertainment 100% business. We've also then got the option to select so region, which is part of the tracking category for reporting. We could assign it to a project or customer if we had the projects feature set up in Xero. And we've also got labels. So labels are for specifically for staff members. So it's where they can group their expenses together. So for example, if we meet with our Bayside customer regularly and we want to group all our expenses that relate to Bayside meetings. We could do that by labeling it here. Once we're happy with the information, we can click submit. That will then go through to the person to review, which is also me as well. So I can have a look at it here. I can approve that, and that will push through to waiting payment. So once we've paid out of the bank, we can allocate and reconcile this payment against that. So you can just see where the labels go. So under each staff member in the cog on the right hand side, just underneath just for you, you've got your labels here, and clicking on that, we can see now or just our Bayside meeting one at the minute. But then by clicking into that and save, we can use the view the label expenses relating to that. Sorry, so at the minute it's just the cost of meeting. Brilliant. So that was everything in Xero I was going to demonstrate. I'm just going to jump into Receipt Bank quickly and just show you a couple of things in here. Cool. So yeah, just quickly in Receipt Bank. So the first thing we're just going to look at is auto-publishing and supplier rules. So auto-publishing would mean whenever anything's uploaded into Receipt Bank, by selecting to have the item for the supplier turned on, as long as all the information is being extracted from the receipts correctly, that would automatically push it straight into Xero for you without having to go into Receipt Bank to publish it manually. To do that, we just come into suppliers here, and I'll use British Telecom as the example. We could just click here, these two arrows to turn on. And then category, we can always select it to go to the same place. So we'll choose telephone. So any items now that are uploaded into Receipt Bank, they'll automatically be published directly into Xero for you. The final thing we're going to look at is payment. So they're really handy. So for, like Ryan was saying, for credit cards where the item's already paid, we don't want it to go and sit in our awaiting payments list. We want it to be marked as paid automatically, ready to be reconciled. So to do that, I've just got a receipt in here in our inbox. I've clicked on my item. And if I scroll down to the bottom under payment, here we can select yes for the item to say the item's already been paid. We can choose where it's been paid from. So here, this is our credit card bank account in Xero. We've also got these two links here to say that the bank account is linked between the two, so we know it is correct. We can also add new payment methods just below it. It'll always publish to purchases, and by doing this, we're publishing it as paid wherever possible. So once we're happy with all the information, our green button down here to publish will be ready, so we can click that and that will send it through to Xero. So that was everything, all the demo I was going to do, so I'll just pass you back to Ryan now just to finish up. Are all the updates now live on Xero? I'll probably leave that one to Ryan to answer.
So most are. So some of the reporting is not, and they're kind of being released in stages to the users. So you may see like the short-term cash flow report and the business report just appear one day, because I think how the structure's worked in Xero, they can't release it to everyone in one go on this type of report, so they're doing it in stages over the coming month. Everything else, apart from when I've said that they're working on it, everything has been released. I guess the main one, pay with Transferwise, yes, you can do that. You can start using that straight away, and it's free until the 31st of July. So my advice is start playing with it. We're going to be doing that in Scrum Bland. See how much of a benefit it is. If you think it is a significant benefit, really speeds up the process, then you can weigh that up against the cost and potentially roll that out going forwards. We think there will be a benefit. We just need to establish how big one it is compared to what we think the cost is for the number of transactions that are going to go through. Brilliant. Well, so that's my dog again. That's everything. So thank you very much for joining us today. We will follow up with because this is the first one we've done, we'll follow up with a poll. I'll be very grateful if you can answer that afterwards, just to help us guide how we want to deliver these going forwards. If there's a benefit, if there's something we should focus on. But thank you very much for attending, and hopefully you've all got some insights of how to use Xero and what's just been released and what might be coming in the future.